Well, hey there, and welcome everyone to Legally Bliss Conversations, and a warm welcome today to my guest, Michelle Thompson. My name is Susie Hickson, and I'm a trademark attorney and the founder of the Legally Bliss community. After having practiced for about 20 years in both big law and having my own law practice, I've worked with a lot of lawyers and have many women lawyer friends. And I've learned that while women lawyers are incredible advocates for others, they seem to not always be great self advocates. Hence, Legally Blissed was developed to give women lawyers a platform to network, and collaborate, and support each other, all while learning and integrating the Bliss method to become more fierce and powerful advocates, not just for others, but for themselves and each other. So, Bliss is an acronym for boundary setting, leveraging legal tech and AI, integrating creativity, self-confidence, and seeking support and community, which is exactly what Legally Blissed does. Today, I am thrilled again to welcome Michelle Thompson to discuss her unique journey as a woman lawyer. Michelle helps women lawyers who struggle with exhaustion and imposter syndrome to build sustainable careers. Welcome again, Michelle. I'm so happy to have you with me today. So let's dig into your story a little bit. I'm going to learn about your journey.
Excellent.
So, why did you go to law school?
What
on earth convinced you that that was going to be a good idea?
I went to law school because I was determined. All right, number one, I'm going to start with, I feel like there was, as a young adult, I always felt like I was born in the wrong decade. I was like, I should have been at Woodstock. I should have been marching in the civil rights movement. That's where my heart was, right?
Yeah.
But here I am, Gen X. So now what?
What's
what did you say?
What is happening?
Exactly. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. Be who you are now. Okay.
Yes.
So, and at the time, I when I went to law school, I was determined to do social justice work, right? I mean, with that ringing in my ears, which is actually interesting because my parents aren't from the United States. They were immigrants from Jamaica, and they got here in 1967, like December 1967. I was in utero when King was killed. I was in utero during the Democratic National Convention. And maybe that's probably why that like all of that really resonates for me.
You picked up the energy from it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So at 12, I decided the initial spark was, okay, I'm going to move to New York. I'm going to practice law. I'm going to do international taxation or something so I can travel all over the world. And I'm going to sing opera at the same time.
I love it.
That's a life. I can do this.
Yeah.
That was so cute, Michelle. So
I know the little things we wanted to do when we were 10,
that is so adorable. You had no idea what the industry was like.
Yeah.
So
I think I went through a period where I was like, I want to be a nun or something, So like,
right, you didn't know what the industry was like.
Did not know the industry. Let's put it that way. Exactly.
So, but as I went to college, and that's when I was like, okay, I want to do something civil rights related. Mm-hmm. Except that, that's like early to mid 80s. And it just didn't look, it wasn't that 1960s thing. Right. Mm-hmm. That's doing public interest work was actually the pull for me to go to law school. Mm. I started with an internship with the Legal Clinic for the Disabled in Chicago. And then, because that's where I grew up in Chicago, so that was easy to do. And then the second year, I was intrigued by Whitman Walker Clinic, which was the clinic that did legal services for people with AIDS in Washington, D.C. I was like, that's intriguing. Mm-hmm. And the summer that I was with the Legal Clinic for the Disabled, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was just passed. And I actually remember being at the dinner table listening to the news with my parents. My mom was very enthusiastic about us watching the news at dinner time and discussing it. Mm-hmm. I remember the stories about the herpes epidemic that was happening, and her commentary on it. And I remember the news turning on a dime, talking about there were gay men in San Francisco who had this weird form of cancer that they didn't understand. I really remember this. This is like vivid in my mind. And I remember ACT UP protesting in the streets in Chicago. And I remembered what the pastor at my evangelical church had to say about all of this. And it was nothing good. And I'm sitting here like, I don't understand where you're coming from about this. Like, these people are suffering. They're dying. What were you talking about? Right. So so Whitman Walker was actually really intriguing to me. I'm like, I want to work there for the summer. I want to go to DC. I want to work there. Let's do the things. So I went to work there, and I actually fell in love with the work. I was like, here I am. This is the civil rights work I want to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I won a fellowship. It's now Equal Justice Work. It was National Association for Public Interest Law, but they funded me for 2 years to work at the Whitman Walker Clinic, helping people with AIDS get entitlements. I did some discrimination work. I helped a couple clients get an HIV waiver because you were barred from coming in the United States if you were HIV positive.
Mm-hmm.
If COVID sounds familiar, it is. There's a whole foundation on which our policies for that are based, right?
Right.
And that was amazing work to me. I got frustrated because we were with a 501c3 and we couldn't, and that was when Newt Gingrich came in with the Contract on America, as Julianne Malveaux talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was frustrated because we couldn't do the political work. It's like, what are you doing? You guys crazy? You can't do this. So like what are you doing? That was frustrating to me. But this is the work I loved. So those are my two answers for what brought me into law.
So that's awesome. Were you so did you do that work when you were in law school or right out of law school?
I did it for an internship for 1 year, and then that was my first full-time job out of law school.
Okay, that's really cool. So you kind of segued that internship on into like your first act right out of law school.
Exactly.
So what was that like, that first year out of law school for you, or 2 years?
Well, okay, 3 months in, I like a couple months in, I learned I didn't pass the bar, so a chunk of it was taken up with sitting for the bar again. That was exciting.
That's fun, right?
The drag. On the other hand, there's a client, the first client I worked on public benefits for, I won his benefits on appeal. And he died.
Rewarding, right? Like that had to have kind of been a great self-confidence boost for you. Probably.
It was, except that he died a couple days before the award letter went out.
Yeah.
So I had to go to a spouse who worked, before gay marriage. Confusing time, but his partner. I had to go to the bookstore where he worked and say, I am so sorry. And he won. It was like the most bizarre. It was the most bizarre confluence of events that had ever happened. But, I loved my work, right? Like, people didn't complain about the work I did in that capacity, right? People actually, for once, had health insurance. They desperately needed health insurance, and they desperately needed income, right? And they got that. Like, the work I did, it was very practical. People were getting the things they needed.
Yeah.
There was a West African, he was from the Ivory Coast, and I helped him with the HIV waiver to get into the United States. He showed up at the clinic telling me he won, that he got it. Like I got to meet him in person, and it was just like, oh, like, well, I've done my work here today. Thank you. Bye. Right? No, but it was very, very satisfying. It was gratifying. It was like, this is what you want your work to be. You want to know that you've made this huge difference for people, and I'm doing it. Is it one person at a time? Is it slow? Yes, but change is happening.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, not all lawyers get to experience that, right? Like, they don't get to experience that fulfilling aspect of their practice. Sometimes, we're just not appreciated. We don't get the thank you note. And when we do, it's like, it puts us over the moon for the next month.
Exactly.
You like put it on the wall. You like look at it every day.
Exactly. And it's unfortunate that we don't get to really appreciate the fruits of our labors in that way. Yeah. Like there's nothing like it.
Yeah. But in your instance, you got to see some real immediate impact from your work.
Absolutely.
That's pretty special.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How long did you stay there? What was that like?
The fellowship was 2 years, and
Okay.
so that was it. While I was working at Women Walker Clinic, we organized into a labor union.
Okay.
So the fellowship ended, and the labor union hired me to work for them.
Okay. So this is a transition.
This is a big transition. Yes. It's a big transition.
I can tell, I can already tell like this, like, isn't that interesting how we kind of go into a thing that is so fulfilling and then some type of levers are pulled that are kind of beyond our control. And then all of a sudden we're thrown into something that we didn't necessarily expect.
And not that if someone told me someone told me at 16, you're going to be working at a labor union, I've been like, I'm all here for it. But me, I don't think so. Right. I wouldn't have seen that. Right.
Yeah.
And here I was at a labor union.
So there you are in labor union. Now, did you go back to Chicago or were you still in
No,
DC?
I stayed in DC, the
Okay.
DC Baltimore area. The labor union was located in Baltimore, still is. It's a local of Service Employees International Union. It's a healthcare workers union, the main one in Baltimore, and they have a number of members in DC. So I was still geographically in the same area of the country.
Yeah. How was that experience? Let's get real.
Oh, again, it was really fulfilling. It was like I did a little bit of organizing, and I organized a couple of shops for the local. And I also negotiated collective bargaining agreements, right? And so when workers find you're like, a pay raise, right? Like, again, very, very pragmatic things. We have a pay raise.
Yeah.
And if you're earning $10 an hour, that's real. That's very, very real. On the one side. On the other side, and I think I often talk about in my marketing people who are working 70 to 90 hours a week. I don't pull that number out of the hat. That was my life. And this is a very different version of practicing law for me. Now, I love the labor movement, but these are people who work very hard and they play very hard, right? And I was part of that, right? I would put in my 70 to 90 hour weeks, and I was drinking my coffee in the morning it's not because I like coffee, but like caffeine is not good for me, right? So if I'm drinking coffee in the mornings to get up and drive somewhere, it's not a good thing. That's a bad look for me, right? How was I managing social anxiety? I was smoking. Everyone else in my office was smoking. All right. Sure.
I was going to ask, I know you're doing something else throughout the day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what is that? What are you using to bring you down at night?
And then, so then I do the whole thing, and then I get home. It's like I need a glass of wine or two or three, right? And actually, and that's a habit. That habit started in law school. I remember being so wound. This is my first year of law school. I was so wound up by the end of the day that I'm like, I can't go to sleep. I had a big old jug of Gallo in my fridge. I don't know if you guys know, like a big old jug, right? And I'd pour myself a glass of wine, then I could actually go to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. That's a habit that I picked up again when I was working for the labor union, because I was so wired by the end of the day that I was like, there I was, cigarette and a glass of wine, and I could go back to, and I could go to sleep. And this whole cycle, Monday through Thursday, would start again.
So how long do you do that? I mean, that career and the stimulants and the depressants. I mean, it's not unusual. No judgment here. Trust me.
Yeah, no, I know. This is this is what happens to us, though, right? Yeah, I think. I mean, I was with the union for 5 years. But that cycle was about 3 years.
Okay. So that's pretty solid, though. 5 years at that union. At the union.
And again, I love the work. I loved the work. I love delivering results for workers. I loved that.
And what's cool I'm curious, how much of what you learned in law school was actually applicable to your daily work at the union?
I think the answer I'm coming up with is 0.
But
I want to walk that back a little bit. There was a grievance that a worker had, and generally I tried to move grievances off to the shop steward, right? Because that was their job. That was it. Like, your shop steward, that's your job to handle these. Because I didn't have the time. I'm busy prepping for the table, right? But there was one that was about religious discrimination. And I actually remember going to, I think it was University of Baltimore, their law school. I went to the library. I was doing legal research. I was like, oh, Look at this.
In a library. Whoa.
I know. I'm like, wow, this is, I've heard of this. Oh, right, I did this once upon a time. So
like first year law school, right? When I remember like being taught to, I don't even know if like the law library is even in existence anymore. I mean, I guess it is.
Exactly. Right, exactly. So here I am in the law library, right? But I'm researching what is going to be my argument for this. I took this because I'm like, this is a legal argument, right? And this is what we're going to have to move through. And I remember doing that prep. I think that worker kept their job because they were not being right. Mm-hmm. And there was a whole thing with the bargaining units on the public. It was for the Washington, D.C., the public healthcare workers and how they were categorized. And there was one group that wasn't in the right local, or they weren't together. I went in, I did my research. Again, back in the library, typed up the brief. There was another lawyer who worked with the lawyer in his own firm. I gave it to him. I'm like, I need your feedback with this. He's like, flip the order, and this is good. Reorganized it. I was up against lawyers with Arnold and Porter, and they were like, that was good. They were like, you have quite an argument there. I'm like, why? Thank you.
You're like, well, I get the law library. What about you and your fancy firm?
Exactly. I researched that myself. I wrote it myself. Thank you very much.
Exactly. I love it.
And that argument carried the day, right? So
yeah.
I can't say that it was never applicable. I can't say that. But what you don't learn is like the navigating people, the navigating personalities, the politics of the work. I mean, I don't know how you would teach that in law school, but like the whole politics of what you do, they don't teach you about, and clearly we don't teach people about how to love up yourself while you're doing this work. Mm-hmm. That's clearly not.
No, we're drinking wine and smoking cigarettes and guzzling coffee.
I mean, ironically, I started at the union by training for marathons and doing AIDS rides. That was the first 2 years of my work at the union, and then the hours wouldn't allow me to do that. I had a day where I biked to Baltimore from DC, right? Like I took my health and welfare very, very seriously, and then when the bargaining became too much, all of that went by the wayside.
Yeah. You prioritized the job over taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Why do you think you did that?
This is where I think it's different for public and private sector. And I shouldn't say public, but for the not-for-profit sectors, when you're doing God's work, right? I mean, I think, are they doing God? I don't know, that's debatable, but like you feel like you're doing work that impacts people's lives in a particular way, and you need to do your part. And if that means you do what you need to do to make sure that workers are okay.
It had a higher purpose for you.
It definitely had a higher purpose for me. And for many people who've done public interest work, that higher purpose is everything.
It's everything.
It is. My sister, actually now she works for the ACLU, although her hours are nowhere near what mine were. But this is God's work for her. She gets really pissed off because, she can't make the movement to shift how racism gets talked about with punishment in the criminal justice system, right? Like you listen to her talk about it, like this is God's work. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that gets you doing what you need to do. And in my case, it got me to abuse myself in doing that.
Right. You kind of sacrificed yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when was kind of like the turning point when you were like, okay,
something's got to give.
I'm not right. I'm not training for marathons anymore, right? I'm smoking cigarettes. Which are, those don't really work so great together. I'm drinking wine. I'm breaking out the Gallo.
By then I had met my spouse and I was moved on to really high quality wines, but wine nonetheless. And they were really good. I will admit, I don't drink anymore, but like that, my love for Zinfandels, I still love Zinfandels, so I don't drink them, right? I'm like, that stuff's good. It's good. But anyhow.
So we upgraded when you were working to like a more, like a better wine, but you're still drinking it, absolutely. Right? Yeah, every night. And it was obviously like a way for you were buffering, you were, you used it to kind of help you wind down from the day because you're probably just like, yeah. So when did it kind of finally hit you that you were maybe going to hit a wall?
So I actually,
hit a wall.
Well, no, I thank God I didn't. It wasn't like this. Yeah. But I mean, it was kind of ironic. So my college friends, when they knew me, were like, I'm never going to get married. I'm never having a child. End of the discussion. Moving on. Next. But here I am in my late 20s, early late 20s. And I'm like, wow, it'd be kind of cool. I come out as lesbian for some years at that point. I'm like, maybe I could do this motherhood thing. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I started to think about like, okay. And I was starting to talk to some of my non-drinking and smoking colleagues. I was like, it'd be kind of cool to have become a mother. And I'm sitting here like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. Like, does Junior come with me to the bargaining table? Like, I don't earn enough. So here's the thing. I never got the math formula quite right. I was working 70, 90 hours a week for $40,000 a year. And I'm sitting here like, how am I gonna, I don't have money for childcare. So Junior's gonna have to be with me until they're in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I often thought, well, the only thing I'm getting closer to is a heart attack. It was literally those are literally the words that I had in my head. Like, I'm not moving towards a child, I'm moving towards a heart attack.
Wow. Yeah.
I could see it. I'm like, this is not a child life you want to have. And as I kept, and like in that period, I met, I was with the person who became my spouse, and she suggested, well, you could go ahead and earn a doctorate. I was like, what? If you remember that show, Different Strokes, what you talking about, Willis?
I love that show.
I'm like, that was on my list of things to do. I have a JD. Do I need more degrees? Yeah, why not?
No, why not? Learning is fun, right?
Exactly.
And sometimes it's good to have a partner who like stimulates you to think of greater things for yourself.
Exactly. And it was like, well, that's intriguing. So I applied to NYU. She'd gotten a position at New York University in a different school. So I applied to arts and sciences, and I got into their master's program, and I did that for 2 years, and then I started the PhD, and that was the pivot that broke that particular cycle for me. I mean, I don't drink now, and I'm not, and it's not like, oh, and then I stopped drinking and ran up in the sunset and rainbows and unicorns. No, I'm not saying that. But the cycle of like caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol didn't have the hold over me that it once had. And actually, it's like I was in the program, and I was quite a bit older than my peers, and they were like, this is so hard. I'm like, I feel like I'm on sabbatical. What are you talking about? Like, they're like, I get to read and write all day long. This is boss. I don't know what your problem is. Right?
That's actually really funny, right? Because I look back like when I was in law school, and this is a little bit different, but when I was in law school, there were some non-traditional students who were older, and I just felt like they had their shit together, right?
Because you're like, okay, look, girl, the stories I can tell, right? I mean, really, like war stories, and it's like, oh wait, you want me to read and write all day long? I gotcha.
You're like, this is nothing compared to like what I have seen out on the battlefield.
Exactly. We're battle tested. That's exactly it. We're battle tested by the time
you're battle tested. You've been battle tested for 7 years at that point, or 5 maybe.
Exactly, 7 years. 7 years. And so like that was the pivot. And by the time I started the PhD program, I was pregnant.
Okay. So how did that work out? Like going through your PhD program, being pregnant?
Well, I started it that way, and then I will say that it did nothing for my comps. I flunked my comps the first time, and I'm honest about this stuff because I think we do think like, oh, brilliant PhD. It's like, look, that was work. That was battle tested in a very different way, right? People were like, "Are you scared about becoming a mother?" I'm like, no, I'm scared about these damn comps. Like that was where I lived, right? I need to pass my comps, and I didn't pass them the first time. But for me, in part because of this peer counseling organization I've been part of for many years, at that point, 20 some years, the parenting part was easy. Like I got to hang out with my son as much as possible. I did need some, like when the school year started to ramp up again, I needed someone to be with him so I could do some of the work. But that was so hard. I had to take my comps again. And that time it was, I learned my lessons, and I came back into a very different way. That's the thing. I'm like, okay, that didn't work. How do I change it so I don't have this problem? And I did that. I don't know why I'm going to.
So how old was your little boy at that point?
My son has never known me before I was working on a doctorate. So I gave birth to him. I had finished year 1 of the PhD.
Yeah.
He was with me in the field when I went to Jamaica to do my field work. He went with, he's seen me in the archive doing my archival work. He's seen me writing the dissertation. Like he's been like be it in utero or in real life, he's been with me through the entire PhD journey. So now he's turning 19 this year.
Wow. That's got to be cool though. Like he has to like really look up to you. And it's interesting though, because he's never seen you as lawyer mom. And
that was a good thing.
That's a good thing. Yeah. Probably. I talked to a lot of law moms and it's great. It's great out there.
He should send me a thank you note for that.
He should. What's his name?
James.
James. Okay, did you get that, James? So you're in this video.
And actually, the irony is that I was talking to him a few weeks ago. He's out at NYU. Keep it all in the family. And he is really interested in international relations. And there are 2 paths for international relations.
Awesome.
That you can either go to law school or you could get a PhD. And I'm like, well, I got you covered either way.
Right? You're like, I can kind of guide you along the way, whichever one you choose.
You're gonna excel one way or another, right? Yeah. So, but he doesn't want to do this PhD because it's all for international relations. It's all calculus. Like they do math models to figure out how states are going to behave. I'm like, well, I'm not going to critique your field right now, but that's a mess. Okay, so I understand why you're leaning more towards law school.
So if he goes to law school, you're going to be like, you're going to cheer him on. I'm sure you're not going to be like, oh, don't do that, right? Like,
here's the thing with law school. I am in the United States. I am the first person in my family to have gone. I went through the hard way, right? Because I had to learn. I just had to learn it, right?
You didn't know any other way. I mean, it was kind of say for me, I was the first person in my family to go to law school and to work in a big corporate environment. Exactly. So it was like I was kind of thrown to the wolves. I didn't really have anybody to go talk to about the challenges.
My motto was C equals JD for real. Like that was my motto. Like I just need to graduate. I didn't need more than that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But my sister, so this is when I was living in DC and I was being a lawyer. She went to law school.
Your sister is at ACLU now?
Yes, exactly. Okay. And she came it was Thanksgiving and she was panicked about finals. Oh my God, I don't know what I'm gonna do in the finals. And I just looked at her. Because at that point, law school and the bar, I got you, babe.
Yeah.
So I said, go take notes. Contracts, offer, acceptance, consideration, any other things that might nullify the contract. You're good. That's how you're gonna analyze it. I just handed her the outline. Yeah. The outline that I never wrote. Okay. Right. Torts. Da 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 da. Boom. Crim. Intent. Blah 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 blah. I literally fired again because the bar wasn't that far away. I fired this stuff off. My sister earned straight A's in law school. Straight A's, right? And I didn't tell her anything deep. I didn't go in any case law. I didn't do a whole. No. I gave her structure for how to approach it. That
interesting
is what my son would get. Right? Like that's what he's gonna get. I'd be like, I got you, boo.
Right. And you can teach him about the support. You can say, this is superfluous. Like, you don't need to worry about this stuff. Like,
exactly.
These are the top 5 things you need to know. Like, I mean, I don't know if at the end of the day, he's going to pass the bar, right? Now, does he want to go work in big law or whatever? Like, he's going to have to.
That part he'll have to sort out. But I mean, I'm not going to tell him law school is going to be fun and full of flowers and rainbows and unicorns. I wish it was. It's not. That's not what we do in this country.
But neither's going to PhD, right? Like,
none of it is. Right, exactly. And at the same time, I can either way, I'd be like, this is how you go handle this. And if you follow my advice, you're good.
You're
golden.
Good.
you're golden. You're gonna write your ticket, and it's gonna be brilliant, and you're gonna move on. It's gonna be fine.
That's exciting.
I actually had the same conversation with my sister when she didn't pass the bar the first time. I said, okay, here we go. This is what you're going to do. You're going to stop paying attention to the essays, and you're going to work the questions. You're going to work the multiple choice questions. That's where you have room to improve. She didn't tell me she did this. My mom told me. My mom told me she was upset because she ran out of multiple choice questions. I'm like, yes, she's going to pass.
She really had multiple choice questions at that point, right?
Exactly. And she passed it. She blew it out of the water. I'm like, I'll take credit for that. Thank you. Yeah. But that's, I say all of that because I think people, to succeed in law, to succeed in academia, it is everything to have people who have gone through that path before, right? There's a reason why it was very unusual to see women in either of these fields, in either of these industries. There's a reason, right? There's a reason why Black people don't show up in the numbers that we could in these fields, because we don't have people who've done it before, and there's no roadmap for us to do it. So we sit there banging our heads against the wall going, I don't know what you want me to write in this essay.
Yeah, it's like you're going along the path, but you're more blind because because sometimes you'll bump in directions that don't work, right?
Exactly.
But if you have a family of lawyers already, then that's so helpful because they can show you they can show you what the most important parts are, right?
Exactly. So you literally over dinner, you sit there and go, boom, here, go take your exam.
Yeah. But like first year, people that go to college, and then the first, generation of people that go into a grad school, I think it's just so much harder.
Mystery. It's a complete, and like, what if James decides he's going to work on a doctorate, I'll be like, so here's how you're going to handle the academic part. There's a political part of this that you actually have to handle. And that's a conversation no one had with me.
Yeah. Having the conversation about the political part, I think is important because it helps you to be aware of it. But at the same time, I don't know if it can really be trained.
It can't be trained. I just have to tell you that this is the thing.
Right. Like I didn't know what I didn't know when I went into the law firm environment. Like I didn't know really bad behavior. I was like, is this normal? Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Right,
so it makes
exactly.
it that much harder to navigate it.
Exactly.
But I feel like when you're trying to navigate politics in the law firm or any kind of environment, it's so hard to teach that because every individual is so different. They have different values. And then you're having to navigate all of these different people and they're different. It's like palace intrigue. Right,
exactly like that. Yes, it is.
I love reading about King Henry the Eighth, I guess, and his
he's the one who killed the wives. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I'm like, there's so much palace intrigue, and I'm like, man, I get into the dramatic part of it, in the navigating all that, and I'm like, I mean, it's no different than
it is. It's like, who's got the knife? Wait, are you the one? Right, exactly.
I mean, that's kind of how it was. So, okay, so you got your PhD. At this point, you have a little boy. What did you do next? What happened?
So when I graduated, he was 8, actually.
Okay.
And
still your little boy, but
he's definitely my little boy, but he's definitely not nursing anymore, right? And that child left the station. I started to adjunct because, all right, so I graduated in 2012 after the 2008 meltdown, the economic meltdown in the United States. And before 2008, so my primary field is African diaspora. My secondary field is colonial Latin American Caribbean history. There were lots of positions in the African diaspora prior to 2008.
Yeah.
After 2008, those all kind of disappeared. And so I could adjunct different kinds of courses, but they weren't, but the positions that were being created were not in my field. Mm-hmm. So I started adjuncting, and here we go with my fabulous formula of working. I was commuting 2 to 4 hours a day, depending on where, what the institutions was. I was working at 3 different schools.
It's a lot.
Teaching at 3 different schools, grading at 3 different schools. And grading is no fun. I do not miss grading. I will never miss grading ever again.
And this is back before people were doing online education, right?
Exactly. So people would hand me their papers. God, I hate it. Anyhow, and I wasn't able to pay my bills. Like I literally couldn't pay my bills, and I got really depressed, like to the point where I was thinking about ending my life. I'm like, I can't, forget it, done. How is someone so overly educated and unable to pay her bills? This is madness. Thank God for James. I looked at him like, that's a bad look. I can't do that. I cannot do that for him. Like that's literally what I thought. Like I can't. Him and this peer counseling organization, like these two things together kept my head above water, right? But I'm like, I cannot do that to him because I knew that like if I plant that seed in his head, it's never going to go away, right? And so I actually was like, okay, what do you love to do in the world? Like, I mean, you like this is fine, but what do you love to do? And I'm like, oh, I love journalism. Let me see what I could do. Journalism was in the same free fall as academia, and so I actually did an internship at Latino USA, which is one of the NPR shows, which I loved. And everyone's like, you should get a master's in journalism. And I'm like, have you seen read the alphabet soup of what?
Have you seen after the name Thompson?
No.
Like, can we put any more letters back there?
There will be no more letters. We are done. Thank you. I'm not stepping back in the classroom. Although, if someone offered me money to get an MFA in vocal performance, I'd be on it. But that's a different issue. Yeah. That's a very different thing. I could perform for 2 years. I'm here for that. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're not going to write that off and never say
never. I'm never going to say, but it would have to be something radically different like that, right?
Sure.
So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna. We're done. The journalism thing, that's been real. That's been fun. Thank you. Moving on. And I had, because this peer counseling organization had like really, just like it really. I had changed people's lives. It had changed my life. I'm like, wouldn't it be nice to not volunteer and do this work? Wouldn't it be nice to get paid to do this work?
Wow. That's pretty radical of you. I mean,
well, I'm literally like, what are the skills I have? This is a skill set. Pay me.
Yeah.
And it's not just on that organization. It is what it is, right? And it's given me an amazing foundation. I'm like, okay, how do I translate this into something?
You got to get paid. I mean, we have to get paid for our time. We have to get paid
at the bottom line, right? Yeah. So not 24 hours after I had that thought, I saw in my inbox a scholarship for learning how to become a coach. And I'm like, well, if this Google thing isn't disturbing, I don't know what it is, because you're now in my head, right? And so I'm like, let me apply for the scholarship. Let me see what happens.
How did it knew what you were like searching, and like maybe you emailed and
I hadn't searched though. That was the weird thing. This is like literally in my head. It was literally in my head. I'm like, that's really bizarre. Okay, but I'll take that as a sign, and I will operate on said sign.
I'm all about serendipity, so you never know.
So the person who actually ran this particular program had been part of this peer counseling program before. I got the scholarship. I'm like, all right then. So that was it. I did the program. I never looked back. Many of my peers actually said, "Oh, Michelle's the real deal. She is good at this. She is good. People want to work with her." And I was like, "Well, that's exciting." So for actually many years, until like January of last year, we're 23. January.
Yeah, it's confusing these days. I know.
January 22. I stopped teaching. I stopped teaching part-time, but I taught and was building my business at the same time. And that completely pulled me out of this tailspin.
Yeah.
It actually gave me, so there are a few things, right? That number one, if I'm going to be doing both of these things, I have to take exquisite care of myself. So I got back into the habit of making sure I was exercising regularly. I prayed the rosary. I got back into praying the rosary, like regardless of what people think religiously, for me, that was it's a very grounding ritual. And over time, I started to add more and more ways that I really take care of myself, including like making sure I get enough sleep, all of the things, right? So that I stopped drinking, because I realized, wait a minute. I had a glass of wine with dinner last night, but here I am up at 2 a.m. and I'm cranky, right? No. Like sleep, alcohol, sleep. Okay.
I've heard that like alcohol, like when you have sleep, when you've had alcohol, it's not really contributing to your regenerative cycle.
No, it's a stimulant. It starts as a depressant and then it becomes a stimulant because it's all sugar. And I'm like, yeah, no, you gotta go.
Yeah.
So you've got to go.
Sugar. Oh, I mean, that right there's for another
And that's a whole other, don't get me started. But like, I mean, I actually, for the first 8 years of my son's life, I didn't drink because I mean, I nursed for a while and then I hated the smell of it. Like I just didn't. And then like, true story, I was finishing, it was like the worst semester of my life. I'm sitting here like trying to get this damn thing done so I could defend in January. And I would like be working at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, I just want a martini. Like, and I was like, okay, you're not gonna have a martini now. We're not gonna do it for the first one. Like, we're gonna have your martini. Okay. Right? So, but and it was actually right after I finished that I actually had started drinking. I like just wanted that martini.
But martini.
Just went with, and yeah, it turned into two that night, but I never actually had one again, which is good. But and then it took me a while.
It turns into too many, right? So
well, two was far too many for me. But I stopped drinking. I actually, I started meditating much more regularly. Like all of the habits that I need to do these two huge jobs and raise a child all really came together. And and it was my coach. And part of it is that I've always been about helping, I mean, both scholars and lawyers, our lives are, I mean, I've lived both of them, right? Our lives are stunningly similar, right? And when you do marketing, you can't use the same language, but it's really, really similar. We work far too many hours, for doing really, really hard work, and we put the work before ourselves. Now, I don't know how you're going to write a book and not get any sleep, right? And so, like, I just that's not doable, right? I don't know how you serve clients zealously and not sleep. Like that doesn't, you can't make good calls on what to do in that state, right? So I wasn't going to grind and build a business. That's not what I want my clients to do. And I believe in walking my talk. Like, what's the success? Well, Michelle's not strung out. There's something to be said for that, right?
A strung out coach ever, right? Like you kind of have to walk your.
You have to walk your talk. I very, very firmly believe that, and actually becoming a coach has actually helped me. It saved me to a huge degree. That really saved me. But there are many other people's lives that have benefited because I can hold the line there.
So what did your coaching program look like?
It was, this is cute. It was by phone. It was before people were using Zoom all the time. Like people had Zoom, but that was a weird thing. So it was we'd call in by phone into a conference call.
I remember those. Yeah, those were the olden days. But yeah, I kind of remember.
It was like mid-20, the 2010s. It's kind of funny. It wasn't that long ago, but right,
it was long. It feels like forever.
It feels like forever ago, right? Yeah. But we would do things that way, and then we would pair up by phone to do our practice sessions with each other.
Yeah.
And that's how you did it.
So so you've ultimately got certified as a coach, and then you started Resistant Vision. So tell me a little bit about Resistant Vision.
So part of Resistant Vision is the name of it comes from my own academic work. My work focuses on the descendants of runaway communities in Jamaica. They were all over the hemisphere, but I'm not going to do the history lecture today. But in Jamaica, they were descendants of these runaway slave communities that actually were some of the first freed people in the Western Hemisphere. And Jamaica tried to get rid of them by legislative fiat. I don't know, we've not seen that before, have we, here in the United States? Never. Sorry, I digress. So but they tried to get rid of them by legislative fiat, and they're like, no, we're not doing this. And what was fascinating with me about the way that they resisted, I mean, the first time they resisted by warfare, but after 1840s, they actually were very clear about the goals that they were trying to get, and all of their resistance served those goals. And that's what fueled the name of it for me. Like, there are lots of things that we want to change in the world. How do we make sure that our actions that are resisting the present so we can create what we want are actually very in line with that, right? I like, my favorite thing to pick on is gay marriage. Now, I'm gay married, I will admit to that. But how did we as a community pick the most conservative institution to move our liberation forward? That still doesn't make sense to me. And the promise of GLBTQ communities is that we can form very close relationships with people for our own well-being, health, and longevity.
Mhm.
That's the promise of it. That doesn't have to be two people locked away in a house forever and ever, amen, serving each other's needs. That's just that there's something that strikes me as completely absurd about that. Like, you can build community in a very different way, and we lost that potential, right? So our resistant actions didn't actually serve an overall vision of what our communities need, right? And so anyhow, I could go on with the example, but
No, I love naming stories because I'm a trademark lawyer, right? So it's always good to know the origin stories of
exactly. So for me, it's like, it's not just about, yes, I want people to sleep well and eat well, but for what? Right?
Deeper, like,
right. I don't want you to do this so you can work better. I'm tired. I literally write in my newsletter, I'm tired of writing about productivity. Like, I am sick tired of it. I actually want you to do this because because you are valuable on this earth because of you. You don't have to, if you never lifted another finger, if you never wrote another word, if you never served another client, that would be fine. You do it because you're you. And by the way, there's a climate emergency. And I think I actually think that we're not going to be able to grind our way to end the climate emergency. We're actually going to, like, if the thing that gets robbed from us, both in the legal industry and in academia, is our pleasure, is our connection to pleasure. And if we don't reconnect with pleasure, we're going to keep doing the same old stupid things that end up with, 80 degrees in the middle of April in New York City.
I'm like sweating right now. So this is really interesting. Because I forgot where I was going to go with that. I guess my comment really wasn't that interesting, but I think that's cool that you're doing that and helping people realize that there's so much more to life, right, than producing a contract or billing more hours. Because, like, for example, yesterday, and see, here's me. Sometimes I don't walk the talk. Like, I got home and I felt
it's not about perfection, right? We all have these pieces, right?
I got home and I was like, oh, like, I don't feel like I was very productive. And then I sat down and I just thought about, like, what all I'd produced. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I was really on fire, like, but I was still being very harsh. And this, it kind of makes me think, like, what, and I never really thought about it this way, but I do put a lot of value on me, not as me, but as what I can produce for other people. So I think it's really interesting that you're kind of digging into the root of that with your clients. Like, you're not just teaching them how to be productive, but it's like you're kind of helping them establish their why and, like, what their value is as a human.
Exactly. And I think this is particularly important. I mean, we live in societies that extract, it's okay for ourselves to provide pleasure for other people. Mm-hmm. It is a radical act for us to have pleasure for ourselves. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right.
Or there's leisure to be leisurely.
Exactly. There's a woman who wrote, her handle on Twitter is the Nap Ministry.
What is it?
The Nap Ministry.
Okay, I'm gonna have to find her. I like her already.
She actually wrote a book about, what did she call the book? Rest is Resistance or something like that. And I have the book. I'm going to read it, I promise. But that's my whole point. Like, if we can't take, these are the most fundamental human parts of ourselves, mm-hmm. right? Like, we get to rest. We get to enjoy the company of other people. Maybe we're just yakking it up with friends. Maybe we're having multiple orgasms. Maybe we're having a wonderful bike ride on, somewhere, right? I don't care how we do this, but we get to have that for ourselves. It is part of being human. And what these industries have done that's the first thing they take. That's the first thing. Maybe they don't take it. Maybe we give it, but one way or another, we need to take that back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll have more time for leisure and pleasure, and maybe more, I guess maybe less mental health challenges, which I think some of the mental health challenges lead to feelings of not being worthy of leisure or pleasure? Do you think like the integration of more technology and AI is going to help move us towards the ability to have more of that? Or
I suspect it's not. Like, so the problem, I love, now I'm a huge disclaimer here. I love me some technology. If you think you're going to take this from me, you're going to take probably out of my cold dead hands. I just want to be really clear about that.
Yeah, right.
Like
your life is in that phone, right? Like
I have no identity without that phone. I just don't even know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. Okay. Okay. I'll be very clear about that. With that said, I have not met a piece of technology that hasn't actually extended our work hours.
That's a good point.
Right? I mean, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is that I can do work with a client at midnight.
Mm-hmm. But is that wonderful, right?
I'm sarcastic, but yeah, right, right,
yeah.
But right, like that's problematic.
Yeah.
I think if here's the challenge with our mental health problems. We spend so much time up here, and I love our minds, and they're really wonderful, and I don't wish them any less than what we've learned and what we're able to do. But we have to connect our minds back with our bodies before we have before we have any shot at actually making real moves on the mental health process, right? The mental health we're not gonna be able to talk our way out of this. That's why talk therapy is so slow. It's effective, but it's slow. It's years, 6, 7, 8, 10 years later, people actually make progress. Lawyers, the way that the industry is running us, we don't have 10 years. We need it done immediately, right? And that's why I'm such a fan of modalities that really enable us to connect body and mind, right? People I've not done an EMDR, eye movement, something. They talk, but the why it's effective is because it connects your body and mind, right? When I work with clients, I use emotional freedom techniques, which is tapping. Like if you see people doing this stuff, we're tapping. It's something that connects people's bodies and minds. I had a client a couple of weeks ago. She came on the phone upset. She was on a job hunt, and people completely overrode any feedback she had for that. And I was like, you know what? We're gonna just touch that point and let's just breathe. And she's like, oh, I can feel the carpet under my feet. Yeah. Get back in your body. Like if we cannot connect mind and body, we don't have a path to pleasure.
So what do your typical clients look like? Like you just mentioned this client who came to you. Someone I presume is already a client. Who are the typical people that you work with on these different modalities and things like tapping to help us connect our mind with our body a little better?
We are go-getters. We love our work, right? Like this is not about bashing our work or industries. Like we love our work, we love our industries. We have something to say. We want to make an impact, and we are maybe not at the end of our rope, but you can see that there is an end to the rope. And you don't want to end up there, right? Because the end of the rope is probably too late in some ways, right? Like you're trying not to get there, and there's got to be another way. And when people come to me, they're coming to me at that point. Like, I want to accomplish this. I do not want a heart attack at the end of it. I want to accomplish this. I would prefer not to have diabetes when I'm done, right? Yeah. Those are the people who are coming to me. Awesome. And they don't necessarily even know. I mean, that's my job, right? That's why I get all the trainings and all the things, right? Like they don't even necessarily know that they need to reconnect mind and body or any of this, right? I bring that to them and they're like, oh, I feel a lot better. I'm like, yes, you do.
They don't know what they don't know, right? Exactly. A lot of times, I think lawyers can be kind of some of the most resistant to alternative types of treatment and, therapy and things like that, because, we're just so analytical, right? We don't allow ourselves to kind of like take time to meditate.
Exactly.
Say the rosary, like whatever your thing is, like we don't allow ourselves the time to do that. So I would think that working with lawyers could be some of your more challenging clients.
I love us, and we can be really challenging, but it doesn't take a lot. Like
Yeah.
I don't spend hours and hours tapping with people. The other thing is that tapping is really, it's a fast modality, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you give me 20 minutes and you'll be like, whoa, like what? Wow, I'm not the person who sat down here is not the person who is here now. It doesn't take long before you're like, this is a different thing.
Yeah. It's
And
fast.
it doesn't take that long for you to go back to work and go, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't, the nice thing about coaching is like we figure out how to get from point A to point B. The problem is you can't get from point A to point B if you're in fight, flight, or freeze.
Right. Which is how we are a lot of the time.
Exactly. So I'm like, let's stop the fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
I get it. You're here for a good reason. Let's pull ourselves out of that.
Let's get the
And then
cortisol levels down a little bit here.
Please stop the cortisol levels. Yes. Please stop the cortisol.
Yes. The cortisol levels can be lit. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
Michelle, listen, I want to be very respectful of your time. I've so loved having you on here
Oh,
and
it's been
learning all
a
about
pleasure.
you and your journey. And I've got just two more quick questions.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
The first one is, what is next for you over the next year in Resistant Vision?
So I'm doing a 50 state virtual. Let me be clear about this. A virtual 50
Cool.
state tour of doing my workshop, my EFT workshop for bar associations.
That's awesome.
Because where do lawyers gather? Bar associations. That's where
Yeah.
we hang out, right? So I'm doing one for the New York City Bar Association
Okay.
on May 4th at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's called Put the Pleasure in Your Practice.
If you want to give me the link to that, I'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. I actually don't have a link, but if you go to the New York City Bar Association, you can register there for it.
Okay.
So I'm doing that next week there. I'm going to be doing one in DC in June, and I'm going to be scheduling them from state after state after state. So if you run a wellness committee, or if you're, what'd you say?
Said 48 to go.
48 to go, right? And well, I'm working on those. But if you are running a wellness committee and in a bar association or the legal assistance program, I think it's a little late then, but that's good. We'll grab you there. But like, yeah, contact me because I want to set up something. And if you're not in New York or DC, we got a whole country to do. So talk to me. Let's make this happen. That's actually what I want to do, is just to really bring this to as many lawyers as possible, so we can have a different way.
I love the 50 state virtual tour. I think that's so brilliant. So my next question is, where can people find you?
You can find me at resistantvision.com.
And you can see the Resistant Vision underneath her name there.
Yeah.
And I'll just put the link to it in the show notes if I have not already. But thank you again so much for hanging out with me.
Oh,
Michelle.
Susie, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a pleasure.
This was such a pleasure. So much fun.
Yes.
And if you enjoyed this show and you'd like to stay updated on future Legally Blissed content, including when we go live in the conference room and additional interviews and conversations with women lawyers, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little bell so you don't miss any content about how you can become a more fierce and powerful advocate like Michelle, not just for others, but for yourself and other women lawyers. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and Michelle, and have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.